Hello everybody, my name is Colin Crockett, brother of Cameron Crockett, the defendant in the case of the Commonwealth of Virginia versus Cameron Crockett, and basically coming to you tonight to back up my statements and following post of my brother actually not being the driver, the convicted driver of the case. All evidence leading to a man with the name of Jacob Palmer, and I will be showing you some phone records, conversations that were recorded, and many more things. First of all, I would like to introduce a conversation recorded on the computer between one of affiliates with Jacob Palmer, Kathleen Fisher, the actual mother of his baby. Let me see here. She goes in the conversation with the name of Laura Joyce Curley, talking about how Jacob Palmer arrived at Kathleen Fisher's house, his girlfriend at the time, at around 8 in the morning after the party, and they get into conversation basically saying, and I quote from Kathleen Fisher, Kevin says, which is Kevin Rondorf, who was the host of the party, Kevin says he is real sure it was Jacob, and I will actually post the conversation up for you guys right now. And Laura comes up to say that they all have different stories. Personally, I think that the things that I've heard that it was Jacob, I'll actually bring those things to you to back that up, because he's lied time and time and time again and mixed up his stories time and time and time again, and I'll only show you a little bit of his stories tonight, but later on we'll get into the serious stuff, which basically leads him into a dig hole, a huge hole he's dug for himself, that the Commonwealth has actually covered him up by not bringing him into the courtroom. But that'll be another date. And Kathleen follows up by saying, haha, I quote, well, I do agree with you, I think it was Jacob. And basically she says, and I quote, he's rubbed off horribly on many people's lives and is a piece of crap, and I quote that he's a liar, a fake. Not too much other detail that goes into it from now, but now basically what I'm going to get into is a series of interviews that's been going on since December the 28th, 2008 from the accident, so about 3 years now, that have been conducted throughout the 3 years of the whole investigation. Here's one of the first interviews that Jacob Palmer, it was actually conducted by a former Portsmouth police officer who worked under our firm, or under Andrew Sachs's firm, in our case as our private investigator, Al Donker, and I'm going to read the actual recorded conversation from Jacob Palmer and Al Donker, and I'll also post a photo of this as well, so you guys know that I'm not just making this up. Basically goes into, starts off with, Jacob stated that Cameron and Jack came to the party alone. He was sure they came together. He said they both had been drinking, and Cameron had a bottle of Old English malt liquor, which he said in his testimony, and that Jack also had the bottle of the same beer. He was told he thought that it was odd because he never knew of Cameron drinking and driving before, which he completely volunteered the information to Al Donker. He also stated that Cameron would never let anybody drive his car, and that Cameron also always wore his seatbelt. This wasn't information asked to him in the interview. At no point did Al Donker say, did Cameron ever wear a seatbelt, or did Cameron let people drive his car. He just volunteered the information. He also said, Jacob Palmer stated that he would not be surprised that if Cameron did not get into the back seat after the impact. In the recording, it was stated, this was not prompted or suggested by me. This is from the words of Al Donker. I thought it was very odd, to say the least, that to give this information to an investigator for a reason why Cameron might have jumped into the back seat. What? That just brings total confusion to me, why you would even say that, because the first two people on the scene Pamela Patrick and James Reed were the first ones who came and actually saw Cameron and Jack in the car, heard noises from Jack, and had seen my brother completely unconscious with his arm outside of the back window, hanging out the back window. These are the first two people on the scene. This is the kid who's saying that he would have hopped in the back seat when in reality he was unconscious. Alright guys, the next thing I'm going to highlight is a few more interviews that were either conducted by the actual Commonwealth of Virginia, police department, or Al Donker himself, who was investigator for Andrew Sack's firm. I'm going to basically read these off to you. In the first interview conducted by the police department, it says that Jacob stayed at the house of Kevin Rondorf's and Josh Reddy's house. They said that's what he said to the police officer. He said he stayed at the house, never left the party. But in the courtroom, in the actual last case, there was two witnesses that actually testified to the fact that Jake Palmer did leave the house. He left the house at the same exact time Cameron and Jack left. No one saw Cameron and Jack leave. They can't testify to that fact, and the only thing they remember is Jacob Palmer disappearing at the same time Cameron and Jack did. There were actually testimony from witnesses that say Jacob Palmer actually asked them what they wanted from the store, which was Cameron's whole testimony in court, where he said that Cameron and Jack had no money, Jacob Palmer had weed, they collaborated together to smoke a marijuana cigarette, or blunt as it would be in teenage slang. That was their plan. So in turn, my brother would offer his keys to Palmer as I guess something mutual to use his gas. We can all smoke the joint and or marijuana cigarette together, and we'll be even. But he said he never left the party, and now he's saying he stayed at the house, but there's people testifying to the fact that he left for hours on end, and then when he came back, he looked like he had been, and I quote from Amaral Barretto's testimony in court under oath, saying that he returned sketchy and as he had just been running. What are you running from? Where'd you go? What just happened? That doesn't make sense. Were you outside running when you returned, or what happened for those 3 or 4 hours you were gone? This needs to be known. And he was constantly, and I quote from Amaral Barretto's testimony again, that he was constantly asking the whereabouts of my brother and Jack. Like, where was Cameron and Jack? I thought they were just going to the store. What's going on? What's going on? That's also kind of sketchy, so to speak, given he said in the first interview he stayed at the house. So the second interview by the police, he also says he stayed at the house at Kevin Rondorf's residence, that he stayed there, woke up in the morning at around 7 o'clock, and this is all in the recordings, which I'll post later photos of, that he says he woke up and went to his girlfriend's house at the time, Kathleen Fisher's house. That information, he did go to Kathleen Fisher's house in the morning time because she testified to that as well. But the thing is, in the third interview, he is gently reminded by the police department. The police department approaches him and asks him, don't you remember taking Annie Haynes and Lynn Parati home at around 2 in the morning? He says, I don't really know. Anything could have really happened that night. He doesn't really remember. So basically the police is changing his testimony. The police themselves are changing his testimony and his story. Now his story is that he left at around 2 or 3 in the morning to give Annie Haynes and Lynn Parati a ride home. And it states in the interview that he slept with Parati but doesn't remember if he had actually had sex with her or hooked up with her. It says in the recordings in the interview that he had slept with her in the bed. And then when he woke up at 7 o'clock, he went to his girlfriend at the time, Kathleen Fisher's house. Which one is it? Did you give him a ride home and stay at their house? Or did you stay at Kevin Rondorf's house the night of the party. Which one was it? Everything is contradicting yourself. Alright, here's another crucial factor in the case. After my brother had spent the 2 weeks in jail, he got out, and Palmer actually was contacting myself, because we were neighbors. He lived in the court behind us. We all kind of had a mutual friendship thing going on with him and my brother, and he basically contacted me wanting to have a meeting with my brother, and we have the phone records to back that up, because he stated in another interview that he wasn't the one contacting us, that we were contacting him, trying to get up with him to meet with him and talk to him about the case, but yet he was nonstop calling me about 3 to 5 times in a day to meet up with us to see if Cameron had remembered he was driving the car or not, basically. So what I'm going to read for you guys now is that some things that my brother actually remembered doing after he got out of the accident and after he got out of jail and everything, and the actual meeting with Palmer himself brings some questions to you in the things he says. And this is the words of my brother. I remember walking into Palmer's court, which was directly behind our old residence at 928 Earl of Essex Arch. My ribs were still in a considerably amount of pain at this time, but that did not prevent me from being able to dribble the basketball I was carrying into the court. Jake Palmer had a basketball hoop in the court that we actually played on periodically. So he had brought a basketball to come as basically something to talk about while they were dribbling or shooting the ball. He says, Palmer was already outside shooting at the hoop in the center of his court, though the hoop does not belong to him. He was approaching me rather apprehensively and did not at first offer his routine greeting, which would have included a handshake and small talk pleasantries. After he saw me offer my hand for a handshake, his mood altered drastically, as if he had just found out, like, damn, he doesn't remember I was driving the car. He basically was much looser with his motions and gestures, and one could say he even appeared giggly. We eventually bullshitted for a minute or so, which, without reaching any profanity in conversation. However, this quickly changed as I got right to the point of the meeting. I remember telling him, without offering much reason, that I did not think I was driving the car, and I asked him if he saw anybody leave with Jack and myself, to which he responded, nah. This is his exact words, nah, y'all didn't even dap me up. Dapping someone up refers to a handshake, greeting, or departure. We talked a bit about the possibility of a third person, and he repeated numerous times his supported guess that I had jumped into the back seat of the car after the crash. He added to that, I knew I was smart enough to hop in the back of the car after the impact. Not 5 minutes after I asked him, I was entirely sure it was just Jack and myself in the car, to which he nodded immediately and repeated himself, oh yeah, it was just you guys, numerous times. It was at this moment in the conversation that I immediately began to suspect Palmer infinitely more, given that no man in his right mind who does not personally witness two people leave a location can ever say he is positive as to who those individuals left with. And that is exactly what he did. I continued to press that I was found in the back seat, but this time revealed that I had been found there unconscious. Making a jump from the driver's seat to the back seat is physically impossible. What I stated earlier, from when the two first people on the scene saw him unconscious. So squandered a little time in telling him upright that I simply did not think I was driving and pressed that issue, to which he replied defensively that he had checked his friends at the party. Listen to this. He defensively checked his friends at the party for injuries, and since this search turned up no suspects, according to him, was positive that Cameron, was driving. After hearing and processing this response, my stomach dropped, and excused myself from the meeting and walked back home. This conversation is inarguably paramount to the case, because it is here Palmer dug himself into quite a deep hole. He went from stating he did not see Jack and myself leaving the party, to turning around to be sure that it was just Jack and I that had left. Which one is it? He then claimed he had checked his friends for injuries, which entirely off base given that there was no rumor of a third person until I was released from custody, which was 2 weeks later. How could you check people for injuries at a party when Cameron and Jack had left and no one had known about the accident until that next morning? How could you check people for injuries given you didn't know there was a third party, even know that there was an accident that had happened? So the question becomes then, why lie about checking for at the party for injuries? To this, the answer is simple. A statement made by Palmer to myself was entirely fabricated so that Palmer could cover up himself by trying to make it appear to me as if I had taken care of any suspicions of a third person, for he knew from my posture at the meeting that I did not recall exactly him as the driver in any specific flash of memory. The conversation between us lasted roughly about 30 minutes, and we actually checked phone records to actually prove that it only had lasted 30 minutes. And right after the meeting, he contacted Palmer. Palmer contacted Kevin Rondorf, the host of the party, after this meeting about 15 times trying to get in contact with him. So basically him and Kevin had a lot of conversation about the fact, or that were just trying to get in touch with each other. I just thought it was a bit suspicious of the fact that the host of the party and Palmer were talking right after they met, basically saying, oh, well, he doesn't know it was me, or what have you, you know? In conclusion to all these interviews and statements and recorded conversations, this is only the slightest bit of what has gone wrong in this case. The police poorly investigated the case. The Commonwealth of Virginia did not bring Jacob Palmer into the courtroom when he was yet downstairs as my brother was on trial. They could have easily brought him up and rebutted my brother's testimony, saying that Jacob Palmer was the driver from point A to point C throughout the whole entire trial. We pointed him out, and him only, that he was the driver, that there is evidence that he was the driver. And they never brought him in because they know that their case would have been lost and would have completely ruined their faces, because they thought that my brother was the man and he was the one who had done it. And that's what they had to go with. And basically, this is just the slightest little bit, and I could talk about so many things that have gone wrong, but I just wanted to introduce these things to you. Recently, my brother, who's an innocent man, has been labeled armed and dangerous as a fugitive of the state, and if you ask anybody out there, I'm pretty sure Jacob Palmer's armed and dangerous, and I'll actually post a picture to show the fact. But what I ask of you is, as I post these videos and information and case files, probably once every few days, I'll be giving you more information about what has gone on throughout the case and more evidence, photos of the case, photos of the car, photos of everything that's gone on, and basically let you decide for yourself if there was a third person in the car and Jacob Palmer was driving. So thanks for your time, and I'll be back shortly enough to bring you some more evidence. Thanks, guys.